We've been looking at two variations from the Nutcracker, and the Nutcracker, certainly in the Balanchine version, has been a steady hit since 1954, when indeed Edwin Denby called it George Balanchine's Oklahoma, referring to the most popular musical comedy of the day.
Right.
To go back into time, even before the Balanchine Nutcracker, what was the first Nutcracker you two ever saw?
Ballet Russe, Monte Carlo.
Okay, Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo.
Ballet Russe.
Yeah.
And you were in the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo as well. You were never in Ballet Russe.
I wasn't in Ballet Russe. I was in the original Ballet Russe.
Okay, but they didn't do Nutcracker,
No,
did they?
no, thank God.
Now, today we have seen versions of two variations. The one that's called Marzipan, and it's sometimes called the Mirlitons or the reed flutes, and the candy cane, and
Trepak.
the Trepak, yes. Pat, that's in your. How many versions did we see here that you rehearsed? How many versions did you know that existed in Balanchine's choreography as well?
Well, I mean, there was the one that he did for me originally, but it was never performed.
Oh, tell about that. Why did that happen? How did that come about?
Well, it's a long story because we had been on a European tour, started in September, and went to late November in Europe. And we came back and had about 10 days off, and I had planned to get married. My husband had we got our license, and we could have gotten married on Saturday, the 12th of December. But he said, everything bad that's happened to me in life was on the 12th of December. I'm not getting married on the 12th. So the morning of the 14th, we went down and got ourselves married. And I had a 12 o'clock call, which was not just come in your street clothes. This was a company call. We're going to tell you what your roles will be. So I arrived and I had a corsage, and everybody knew that I had just gotten married, except Mr. Balanchine. And everybody said, does he know? Does Mr. B know? So we walked, I went over to Vida Brown, who was the ballet mistress, standing beside him, and I said, Vida, George and I got married this morning. Oh, does Mr. B know? So then she turned and whispered to him, and his reaction was, I'm so glad, because I was so worried about Brandy, which was the puppy dog that we had gotten on this tour, which he loved. But anyway, Vida said, so you don't need Pat for rehearsal tonight? And he said, oh, difficult music. Difficult music, yes. 7 to 9, my wedding night. I was a little upset. So we, with 4 girls and myself, and we started, and some of the steps are the same. But that version I was doing entre chassis, from point to point, tour en layers from point to point. Anything he was going to give me to do, I was going to do, and I did. And we rolled through, and it was this incredible thing that he was creating, and it was 9 o'clock, and then it was 10 o'clock, and it was complete. And he was pleased, and I was livid, but still alive. Anyway, he never called me for 2 weeks after that. I didn't have any rehearsals, and then we had a season, and he was rehearsing, and we never came back to do any rehearsals of the Mirliton. He was getting other things done. And then we were in a season of repertoire before the Nutcracker season. And he was doing, there were a lot of odd ballets that season, and Opus
34. Yes, and earlier today when we were talking about
Yes,
Stars and Stripes, I said
things.
that was the
Anyway,
ballet before. No, it was the ballet before Nutcracker. This atonal ballet with weird people doing weird things.
Very weird, very weird. And I was rehearsing, and it was something with Jacques, and I was feeling terrible, and I was lying at the back of the stage, shaking, and and they were telling me, taking me to this doctor and that doctor. Mr. B took me to his. Finally, I went to my own doctor, and he said, "You have mononucleosis. Go to bed." And that's where I was for the opening of Nutcracker. So Janet Reed did the thing, but he completely changed it, pretty much of the version that you see now. And that's what I then did when I...
Oh, I see. What did you rehearse?
I rehearsed
with the Indiana today.
That was the Janet Reed version.
The Janet Reed version.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has there been a version since then?
Well, yes.
Yes.
There have been some changes since. Various people have done their own thing with the role, as happens. And Mr. B was always very flexible about that type of thing.
Yeah.
So things changed over the years.
What about versions of the candy cane variation? Now, that's often called trepak, and I believe, wasn't it in some productions, not by New York City Ballet, but in some other companies' productions, it's been done as a Russian peasant dance or Russian clowns.
Yeah, three
Of
Three
them,
was, yeah.
almost like the
Trio.
three Amans in the Sleeping Beauty.
That version was done by Nijinsky
Uh-huh.
years ago, and it was in Sleeping Beauty.
Beauty. And they
They
transferred
lifted
it
the music,
into...
and then they put it back in a Nutcracker. But a lot of companies still do that trepak in Nutcracker, or it's clowns, or it's something else,
Now, Balanchine said that the version that you did and that you coached was by Lev Ivanov, who was the choreographer of the original Nutcracker back in, 1892.
Yeah.
And this is one of the few bits of original from the original production that are left in Nutcracker.
Right. Well, he told me that when he taught it to me. He said that this is a version. That was the version that he saw as a child. And, he grew up saying it in school, and I think he danced it. I think he danced it. He always wanted to dance it. And he rehearsed it. Every time before we did it, he rehearsed it, which was such a pleasure. And I think that's why I remember it so well, I mean, I can do it in my sleep. And I did many times.
Oh, he had a special love for that, I think.
Right.
What version did you teach the boys?
That was the original version, the one that he taught me.
The one that you learned, yeah.
They've added a lot of things to it, which I personally don't think absolutely help it. It's simple, and it's so musical. And I think if you keep it that way, the steps are difficult, as you can see, trying to get the young man to do them. And with practice, he'll be able to do them because they're so musical that it feels comfortable.
You had said earlier, just in conversation, that when Balanchine originally taught you candy cane, there were steps in it that were ruinous on the knee that have been changed.
Yeah. Well, you could see a lot of those twists.
Yeah.
Depending on how you felt at a certain time, if you came down wrong, and which obviously I did because I had 2 knee operations after dancing it.
The impression of candy cane is one of constant velocity, constant energy. It's kind of a whoosh of motion all the way through, and because so many things seem to be happening at the same time. Lifting a hoop, holding the hoop, the the hips twist, the feet change, and
Right.
all this at once. This is this real
Right.
dazzle of
Right.
movement.
Well, you have to really work with the hoop, because you have to hold it in such a way so you can flip it fast to go through it.
Is it heavy?
No, it's not really heavy. It's just a regular hula hoop that you buy at a toy store. But you do have to learn how to manipulate it, because if you don't manipulate it well, it can trip you up.
And at times the soloist seems to sit on the air.
Right.
What,
Well, that's the whole purpose.
how do you get that effect?
It's just the music helps you do it. It's just right underneath you and pushes you up there. And it's the attack, like I was showing the young man, the diagonal, which he didn't quite understand, is the twist when you go into that step to go around. You have to really be this way so that the force of that makes you turn. You really have to work at it. It's not something you just get up and do. But it was fun. It was a challenge, and I loved it.
And the speed that it has to
speed.
be.
Yeah. He used to do that. He would get to the conductor before. It was Léon Barcin in the beginning, and he'd get with him, and he said, and he would do the tempo he wanted. And then he would stand, and I'd see him when I come in and come around. I would see him standing in the front wing, his head down, not looking at me or the stage, but his head down, and he's conducting. It was. And sometimes it was
Whipping
breakneck
him
speed.
faster and faster.
Right. It was a challenge. But it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Patty, did the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo have Mirlitons, or did they have?
I don't think we
they
did.
that
We
at all?
didn't. We
did
really
waltz.
just did the Waltz of the Flowers.
Right.
And the Trepag.
Yeah. I don't remember.
And it may have been
any
lifted.
of the other.
You know,
ones.
it may have lifted
Oh,
other things.
that was the Trepak was
Right.
was
Right.
in Ballet Russe.
Right. I saw Bobby
And
Lay do it.
and the Waltz of the Flowers. But I
Yeah.
think those were the main things. Although there was Chinese.
Chinese.
Yes, Chinese,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no
But no
Mirliton.
Mirliton.
No
No.
marzipan. So the Balanchine marzipan was then your first encounter with it, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Memorable. Yes.
Oh, yes. What are the peculiarities or the difficulties of that?
I don't know why he said it was difficult music, because it's
Yeah.
very
Yeah, it's straightforward.
I think it difficult because he felt he had to really make something dynamic, which was why he had, even in the second version, all those gaguillades, which are not a usual, not done all that much. And all the little
Every time
hops
I
on
looked at you.
point,
Every time he looked at you, you were done.
yeah.
Square,
Yeah.
They're in everything.
Yeah.
Square
But,
dance.
lots of little things where you stayed on point, changement and
Right.
the entrechâssis, if you could.
Yeah.
No.
It's a charming ballet. It really is, and beautifully costumed. With the original costumes with Kerensky using her imagination. I mean, my costume was most wonderful costume, because she had it made in Paris, and it was silk. It was unitard, all knitted in silk, and this little ruff and this cap, and you could do anything in it. I spent half my time dancing, slowing up the crotch of the things, because it really I get sew it up, go on.
Didn't want to lose that.
No, I didn't want to lose that costume. It was wonderful.
One of the things about the Mirlitons is talking about sweetness, is the sweetness of the music and of the choreography. Now, what you have to do when you're coaching it, that it stays sweet and that the dancer does not become simpering and
Right.
cute.
Well, it's sweet, but it has to be elegant at the same time that you're doing a lot of small, difficult steps. And I think it's in the whole picture of the second act, it's a very calm moment, because that like pizzicato music is very subtle. And I think that subtlety is what gets it through, because a lot of it's happening, but nothing seems bravura.
Yeah, I rehearsed this ballet. I don't mean I did it in 1954, and then we were the first company other than the New York City Ballet to dance it. Mr. Balanchine gave it to me in 1959. And we did it from 59 to 1994 till I left the company. And so I rehearsed this version every year for all those years, for 36 years. And so I know all
And
those
then
things.
Bobby
Yeah.
came.
I came to Pittsburgh and said it for
Pittsburgh
Patty.
when I was there.
Yeah.
After I was there 1 year, I said, we have to have Mr. B's Nutcracker.
People say Balanchine was not a storyteller. Nonsense. Balanchine was a magnificent storyteller. Wanted to be, and the Nutcracker is proof of it.
And the full lengths, you know, that he did. Midsummer Night's Dream and Coppelia and all those wonderful ballets he did. And interesting choreographically, but story is there. You know, that's the best you can do. You can tell we're fans.
Yeah.